All right, well, it's Word Study Wednesday. We're here and we're back again. So shalom to you and welcome. Continuing on to our Wednesday word studies, we looked at love in the Hebrew language last week, or I should say with the Hebrew perspective. And so this week, I wanted to kind of dive a little deeper into this. So this is kind of in essence a part 2, but we're going to be focusing on the word hate. And as we know, love and hate are very much overused within the body today, both in the mainstream church and within the Torah observant body of Mashiach or Messiah. So let us begin and let us jump in. So many times I find that Christian teachers teach backwards. We see this other way around. The modern church approaches the scriptures by beginning in the New Testament, forming an understanding of those teachings, and then going back to the Tanakh or the Torah, the prophets, and the other writings to understand its meaning. And this denies the plain cultural text, or the meaning of the text, I should say, and conforms the scriptures to the ever-changing ideology of the church, rather than forming the ideology of the church based on the solid or the consistent rock, if you will, the Torah of Scripture. So when you read the book of Acts, you see that historically the followers of Yeshua did not simply accept whatever new teaching they heard. We know this by the Bereans, but because they could not have tested established revelation, the Tanakh or the Old Testament, which they knew to be true, by a new revelation which they did not know to be true yet. The 3 sections of the Tanakh were already accepted and established as Yahweh's set apart or holy everlasting word. You see, Yahweh had already commanded and Yeshua had already confirmed here in the flesh that a new teaching or claim of messiahship was to be tested against what Yahweh had already revealed. We see Shaul or Paul also notes to this. And it's not the other way around. So interpreting the scripture backwards produces a message that is backwards. And therefore they could not have justified the New Testament teaching by quoting the New Testament. And this kind of gets into how love and hate are 2 words truly misunderstood and extremely overused, as I said earlier. Love is used for everything, like I said in the previous video, from key lime cheesecake pie to Yahweh himself for my wife, and hate is equally spread out too. And scripturally this word is from Strong's Hebrew number 8130 in the Hebrew word saneh, and it is almost seen in every occasion of Yahweh's feelings toward Yaakov and Esau. And we'll look at that on screen here in a moment in Romans 9:13 and in Malachi chapter 1 verses 2 and 3 when we get into doing the word studies. And as we begin to look at this, you'll start to be able to examine the true and, I guess I should say, the more proper perspective coming from the Hebrew mind who wrote the scripture, as opposed to these new definitions that have yet been redefined for us today. So, do you really think that Yahweh hated Esau in the same manner or the same way that I hate abortion or child sex trafficking? I think not. This word itself means to distance oneself or not to prefer. The context of its scriptural meaning becomes more obvious when seen from its Hebrew meaning or Hebrew origin. So when Yeshua says that a true disciple is one who hates his father and mother, Luke 14:26, it really kind of makes you think. But he simply means one who prefers to have Yahweh's ways or the Messiah's ways over his parents' ways. Yahweh preferred Yaakov, therefore, over Esau, because Esau despised his birthright. And we'll take a look at some other scriptures as well in the Psalms to see exactly what those that are called haters of Yahweh, what that truly means and what that applies to people today within the body, or those who call themselves believers. So Hebrew words better correspond to show us and give us a better understanding in our modern present day. So for Hebrew words that would better define our modern definition of hate, would be those such as despise, loathe, and abomination or abominable. Those would better fit our modern definition of the word hate. Like I said, hate can encompass a bunch of different meanings, especially depending on the culture you come from. And that's why it's imperative that we carry the Hebraic understanding of biblical definitions. When we put words back into their cultural meaning, we can get a better understanding of what they mean for us today, and let Scripture define Scripture instead of man putting his bias and his definition on it for us. Here we are on screen. Let me move this blip out of the way for you. And okay, Malachi chapter 1, we got the King James pulled up here. Let's pull it up in the Scriptures. The message of the word of Yahweh to Israel by Malachi. I have loved you, said Yahweh, but you ask, in what way have you loved us? Was not Esau Jacob's brother, declares Yahweh, and I love Jacob. But I have hated Esau, and I have laid waste his mountains and his inheritance for the jackals of the wilderness. Okay, so let's go up into the Brit real quickly to Romans 9. We're going to see the same passage quoted by the Apostle Paul here. Let's start at verse 11. Yet before they were born or had done any good or evil, in order that the purpose of Elohim according to the choice might stand, not of works, but of him who calls, it was said to her, the greater shall serve the lesser, quoting Genesis 25:23, as it has been written, Jacob I have loved, but Esau I have hated. Malachi 1, verses 2 and 3. What then shall we say? Is there unrighteousness with Elohim? Let it not be. For he says to Moshe, I shall favor whomever I favor, and I shall have compassion on whomever I have compassion. Okay, so again, as we were talking about earlier, we let the dictionary of the New Testament, which is the Old Testament, the Tanakh, define for us, because it is the foundation, what we see here in the New Testament. So let's go back over to Malachi. Let's switch back to the King James here. And remember last week we covered love, so you can see our Strong's Hebrew number there for love, but we're looking at, in verse 3 here, the word hated, and it's Strong's Hebrew number 8130. We see that it's Saneh in the Hebrew, the Shin, the Nun, and the Aleph. And now we get the Brown Driver Briggs definitions here to hate, be hateful, but that's still pretty abstract. Let's understand why they chose this abstract word hate, because again, hate can encompass a whole bunch of modern thoughts, expressions, definitions, feelings, etc. You name it, bam. So let's go down here to the Strong's, a primitive root to hate personally. So you can see after the colon and the hyphen, we got the translator's definitions there in place, and we've got a total of 146 times that this word is used. So it's really important to understand the context of this word, of why they chose hate. Now, looking at the etymological dictionary of biblical Hebrew by Samson Raphael Hirsch, he has his definition rendered as reject or distance, semicolon, hate. So I think we need to get a better understanding of the word hate. So I want to take you over to the dictionary and go to the Webster's. This is the Webster's 1828 dictionary. I don't know if it was American Heritage, but I do believe, or I do know it was Noah Webster's 1828 dictionary. So we get hate, to dislike greatly, to have a great aversion to. It expresses less than abhor, detest, and abominate, unless pronounced with a peculiar emphasis. So you see here, unless this word hate or the action given of is pronounced with a peculiar emphasis, we see that it expresses less than abhorring something, detesting something, or again, abominate. As I was saying earlier, that the words loathe, despise, and abominable in Hebrew better fit our modern definition of hate as opposed to the biblical definition. We have Proverbs 1, how long will fools hate knowledge? So this is better translated as, how long will fools reject and distance themselves from true scriptural knowledge? Luke 6, blessed are you when men shall hate you. Now this is again, reject you. Why? Why did they reject the men then? Because they thought that they were teaching against Moshe. Now we see the same thing here today, people thinking that we're trying to be so pious in our own walk that we're trying to earn our salvation through licentious works. Or not licentious works, but through a works-based salvation, rather than accepting belief in Yeshua for the grace, and it's through his grace why we serve him, right? The Roman tyrant was continued to be hated if he was but feared. Now look here, in Scripture, it signifies to love less. If any man come to me and hate not father and mother, etc., Luke 14, and we discussed this earlier, that it meant that if any man chooses their father and rejects or distances themselves from the Messiah over their mother and father, then he's not fit for the kingdom. He that spareth the rod is basically rejecting the development of his son, because he's not teaching him proper reverence and discipline. Hate, noun, great dislike or aversion, hatred. So there's a little bit on the Noah Webster 1828 dictionary definition, one that I still use today. So let's go back to the ancient Hebrew lexicon and we'll type in here. Well, let's go back and choose it since it's not going to let us input it manually. Okay, so you can see that it's the seen and the noon, or you might see it modernly as the shin or the samic. I think it's the shin noon, and the aleph. Now, in Benner's lexicon, he has it as the samic in the noon. So we see that its action is to pierce, and concretely it means thorn. Abstractly, we get the word hate. So when you combine both the letter seen and the noon, or the samic and the noon, that means thorn seed. The thorn, the seed of a plant with small sharp points, cause one to turn directions to avoid them. So you see in English we get the word sin out of this. And a lot of scriptures that come to my mind, especially about the principle of the parable of the sower. So here's the section it told us to go down to, EV. We see here in section E, we don't have an action or a concrete definition. We still get hate as its abstract term. It says, like a thorn, hate causes one to turn away from another. Again, distancing and rejection something causes you to turn away from something. In this case, rejecting Yahweh and his ways, going by your own, doing what is right in your own sight, in his eyes, is essentially our English word hate, or the equivalent thereof. And we also get it there in the hate underneath it at section B. And the sin is a picture of a thorn, and it can mean to grab, to hate, to protect even. The noon is a picture of a seed. That's the word there, or the letter there in the middle. It looks like a sperm, and it means to continue. It can mean a son, or it can mean heir. And then we have the aleph, the picture of the ox, which denotes a strong leader, or a chief, and it has a numerical value of 1. So you can see that what's happening here with these ancient definitions pictographically, you can say that you're rejecting and hating the continuance of the strength. And who was to be the strength of the children of Israel? It was Yahweh. They were rejecting his ways. They were rejecting and continuing in the ways of their leader. And we see that time and time again throughout the scripture, and that's why he had to send the prophets to them, to get them to turn back the hearts of men unto Yahweh, to follow in the true ways of Yah instead of their own, walking by the sight of their own eyes, doing what was right according to their own eyes. And that again is why we see many judges coming against them in the book of Shaphatim, or Judges. So hope this helps, and let me know what you think in the comments below. If you want to dive deeper into this and look more, we certainly can. So leave your comments again. Please share the video, like it, and subscribe, and we'll see you again soon. May Yahweh bless you.